Welcome. Glad to see we have a packed room today. We have an excellent session. Thank you for joining us for the National Colloquium 2013 Juvenile Justice and Child Welfare Process and Placement for Sex Trafficking Survivors. I did want to remind everybody starting off that we have a wealth of knowledge and expertise from stakeholders in child serving agencies, from service providers, from survivor advocacy, here in this audience, here especially on our panels, but also watching across the country live via webcast. And with that in mind, we've left plenty of time during this discussion for questions and answers. For those of you watching on the webcast, you can ask questions via Twitter at #SharingTheHope. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the official welcome by introducing Shared Hope's President and Founder, Congresswoman Linda Smith.
Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. It just seems like it was just a few weeks ago, but it wasn't. It was a year ago that we were together. So how many of you were here at the last colloquium? Lots of you. You that weren't here, you missed something, but I am so thankful that we're going on and doing this good work. Like so much of the good work of Shared Hope and the work around the nation, I get to hear about it. Yes, there's such good people that we can't all do everything. And this particular event brings all of that good knowledge together so that we can put it together and make it something better. Well, first of all, I want to thank Eliza. How many of you had a personal discussion with Eliza yet? Yep, that's why she won't answer my phone calls. And I want to thank our partners at Casey Family Programs. Would you raise your hand, you from Casey Family Programs? Yeah, very good, thank you. Let's give them a hand. And the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. Raise your hand if you're a judge. Yeah, thank you. Well, last year we had ECPAT USA and the Protection Project as our partners, and we focused the colloquium on inventory and evaluating current services available to trafficked youth. Many of you were a part of that. The goal of this year's National Colloquium is to improve protective responses to identified victims of domestic minor sex trafficking by exploring promising policies and practices within the child welfare and juvenile justice systems. These are practices that focus on the understanding and overcoming of existing policy barriers and gaps, and to try to allow for an expansion of access to an array of services. Now, that was a lot of words, but I think you probably got it. Reducing trauma, promoting collaboration and development of promising practices, and to provide safe alternatives to detainment in juvenile detention. Today we're joined both in the audience and those watching remotely, and especially through the wealth of expertise on our panels by leaders from juvenile justice, child welfare, runaways, and homeless youth, NGOs, and survivor advocacy groups. It is our charge to work with all of you to not just continue the dialogue, but to learn and build upon it to help inform system processes and to be a catalyst for system improvement that will provide youth with the quality service they so desperately need and they deserve. We are very aware, and I know a lot of you, that many in this group are survivors. You're survivor leaders, you're survivor servants, you provide services, and you're here maybe for the first time in anything that so focuses on trafficking. For you, you are the most important people in this room. We admire you, we take great courage from you, and we learn a lot from you. We want to thank you, and we will several times during this conference if you're here for the 3 days, but especially today. There is an event for you survivors tonight, and it's closed to the rest of you for you all to hang out. So don't forget that. If you don't know about it, grab one of us that has, looks like they know something. We all have black suits. but not everybody with black suits shared hope, but usually we have black suits, and ask us how you get to that closed event. Thank you again, and I look forward to the results of this colloquium meeting.
Shoot, I missed the memo. I wore navy blue. But I'm still with Shared Hope. Please ask me. Like Linda said, we are really honored to have wealth of expertise in our partnership in both the juvenile justice and child welfare system. And so to welcome you from the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, I'd like to welcome the Honorable Judge Puig-Lugo.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hiram Puig-Lugo. I'm Deputy Presiding Judge of the Family Court of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia and a proud member of the National Council of Family and Court Judges, Juvenile and Family Court Judges. I am honored to read to you a set of remarks from our Chief Executive Officer, who unfortunately could not join us today. And these remarks read as follows. Dear participants, the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges is pleased to be a partner in the National Colloquium 2013, Judicial Process and Placement for Juvenile Sex Trafficking Victims and Survivors, and to work with other sponsoring organizations to pursue improved outcomes for victims of domestic child sex trafficking. Studies have shown youth who are involved in the child welfare and juvenile justice systems, whether currently or in the past, are vulnerable to becoming a victim of child sex trafficking. The most recent sweep of the FBI's Operation Cross Country indicated that 60% of child sex trafficking victims were children from foster care or group homes. In another study, nearly 50% of trafficking victims had a history of prior arrest or detentions, and over 80% of female victims had a history of running away. The National Council recognizes the judiciary's role and is committed to preventing these youth from further victimization. Work on the issues related to domestic child sex trafficking began in December of 2012. In February of this year, the National Council's Board of Trustees passed a resolution calling for judicial action to address this growing problem. In July, a three-part session on domestic child sex trafficking was held at the National Council's 76th Annual Conference in Seattle, Washington. Last month, the National Council convened a community roundtable discussion to discuss the appropriate role of the courts in addressing the needs of these victims. This meeting expanded the community of allies working to address domestic child sex trafficking to include judges and initiated a dialogue among judges, advocates, and service providers in the field and leaders in the federal government. The current goal of the National Council is to develop both a judicial curriculum and tools to educate and assist judges in raising awareness around domestic child sex trafficking and identifying victims who are already involved with juvenile and family court systems. The National Council is honored to partner with Shared Hope International and Casey Family Programs for this event and future programs. Sincerely, Mary Kay Bickett, Chief Executive Officer, National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. Thank you.
Thank you. Something very exciting about today's program, and we're thrilled to see this room continuing to be packed. I hope everybody finds a chair. We are wanting to make sure that our dialogue continues after this event, both online but also through resources that we're making available to you in partnership, again, with our partner, Casey Family Programs. So to provide our final welcome for today, we'd like to introduce Christine Kalpin from Casey Family Programs.
Good afternoon. On behalf of our Board of Trustees and CEO William Bell, it's my privilege to welcome all of you and to this wonderful colloquium. I'd like to join my other partners in thanking everyone for their time and attention to this important issue area. For quick background, Casey Family Programs is the nation's largest operating foundation focused exclusively on foster care and improving the child welfare system, and we're headquartered in Seattle. As an operating foundation, we're committed to improving the lives of vulnerable children, teenagers, and their families across the nation. We believe strongly that every child deserves a safe, stable, and permanent family. Every child. And we work directly with child welfare systems in all 50 states and the District of Columbia to make this a reality. Unfortunately, we know that far too many of the young girls and boys who are victims of human trafficking have also been involved in child welfare. We also know that children who don't have safe and stable families to call their own are at a much greater risk of ending up on the streets as sex workers. We're committed to working in partnership with child welfare systems across this country to protect more vulnerable children from this terrible tragedy. The sex trafficking of youth is a cross-systems issue, and a series of agencies and stakeholders, including child welfare, needs to be involved in intervention and prevention. We are so proud to have a number of child welfare directors, judges, providers, survivors, and others here today to learn from each other and contribute to this dialogue. We recognize that while limited data exists, what data we have is so very concerning, as my dear colleague had already shared. For example, in California, the Child Welfare Council found that from 50 to 80% of victims of commercial sexual exploitation are either currently involved or had been involved with child welfare. Child welfare systems are responsible and charged with promoting the safety, permanency, and well-being of all children. Our work tells us that these systems are most successful in this work and can achieve these outcomes by collaborating and coordinating efforts with other systems, including the courts, law enforcement, mental health, housing, and education. We hope these efforts can better ensure the systems are focused on assisting these young girls and boys in healing from the traumatic effects of this abuse and neglect. It's also critical that we pay attention to the ways child welfare might create an environment of increased risk, whether placement in congregate care facilities or the lack of strong relationships. It's so important that we not lose sight on the various ways in which this is a problem. Child welfare systems are so poised to be a significant part of the solution to sex trafficking, but again, only if there is a partnership to support these youth, and the child welfare agencies have the support and financial resources they need to really provide the full array of unique supports that these individual victims need. I know the conversations and dialogue today will really contribute to that, and we are so proud and pleased to be a part of this. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And now to begin our discussion, we are honored to have Catherine Chan here representing how the federal government can work with our child-serving organizations, child welfare, juvenile justice, runaway and homeless youth, and how we can intersect in those ways. Catherine serves as Senior Advisor on Human Trafficking to the Department of Health and Human Services. Thanks so much for being here, Catherine.
Thank you, Eliza. It's a pleasure for HHS to come back to the colloquium this year. I know last year, then Assistant Secretary George Sheldon was here. He got a great standing ovation at the end in that packed room. I'm not here for those purposes, but I did want to start by sharing the message that convenings like this matter, and to give you a sense of what's been happening at the federal agency level. The discussions and conversations that you had at the colloquium last year, it helped to inform, one, the federal strategic action plan on human trafficking that I'll talk a little bit more about today, and it also helped to inform the child trafficking guidance that we released a couple of months ago for child welfare and runaway homeless youth programs. And so please have lively and engaging conversations throughout the afternoon, because your perspectives matter, and actually we count on the information from the field and from service providers to inform some of what we're doing within HHS. So to start with, on the Federal Strategic Action Plan, many of you in the room are already aware of this. This has been a year-long effort across the federal government. At the Department of Health and Human Services, we've been co-chairing this process along with colleagues at the Department of Justice and Homeland Security. And this is the first time in modern history where the U.S. government is putting together a strategic action plan specifically to victim services. How do we better identify victims and then provide holistic and comprehensive services to survivors of trafficking? We received hundreds of comments and ideas through an online platform, through emails and letters. When we kind of piecemealed all that together, it was more than 1,400 distinct ideas that came from across the country. So thank you to all in the room and who are watching who participated in that. And a bit of an update, just so you have a sense of how serious the federal government took this. When the public comment period closed at the interagency level, so more than a dozen federal agencies were meeting on a weekly basis, reviewing those comments, and again, we're taking them very seriously. We're in the final stages, and the final strategic action plan will come out in early next year. And where we're looking for your ongoing partnership as the final plan comes out, look at the action items. Most of it, because it's a federal plan, they're only commitments that federal agencies can make, but if there are efforts that you're already part of that we can coordinate on, collaborate on, if you see gaps that we did not address through the public comment period, just let us know when that comes out. And then onwards to the child trafficking guidance that we released a couple months ago. We are really excited to have new leadership within the Administration for Children and Families. There's a new Associate Commissioner, Jian Chang, of the Children's Bureau, and also new Associate Commissioner, Bill Bentley, of the Family Youth Services Bureau, which covers the runaway homeless youth programs and domestic violence programs. They are both very committed and supportive of child trafficking issues, and if you haven't had a chance to look at the guidance yet, we have some copies outside. You can look on our website to download them as well, but I just wanted to pull out a few pieces of what you'll find in that guidance because it's relevant to the conversations you'll have today. So one, we heard the field loud and clear. We need more awareness and training, screening protocols, looking at data initiatives a little bit more, having practices and intervention and prevention efforts that are survivor-informed, youth-informed, and particular to our conversation this afternoon, how do we better coordinate with the juvenile justice system and across with the Runaway Homeless Youth Program? And what you'll see in this guidance and what you'll see in the Strategic Action Plan is that at the federal level, there are ongoing conversations with our colleagues at the Department of Justice, Office of Victims of Crime, and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. So know that the conversations are happening, but also know that they're best informed by what we hear from the ground and from the field. So what we're always asking ourselves are the types of services that survivors need, do they exist? Are survivors and victims able to access the services as efficiently as they need to? And if there are challenges, what can we practically do through an administrative fix or a policy fix? And that's where we really need to hear from you of what actions we can take specifically at the Department of Health and Human Services, but also with our interagency colleagues. So I will leave you with those action items in terms of areas for discussion. And then I know that the conversation today is focused on child sex trafficking, but I did want to note that on the child trafficking guidance, we are mindful of child labor trafficking. Just as recently as last month, the Department of Children and Families in Florida reported cases of, or a particular case of child traffickers who had, I think, 24 children were identified, and they were being shuttled around in this van that the detectives called a wooden prison because they had all these compartments in the back of the van, and the children were starved, abused, and being forced to sell products door to door. And so it's a very real problem in our communities, and the child welfare system is coming across labor trafficking issues as well. So I just wanted to put that out there, even though there is a particular focus of conversation for this afternoon. So we look forward to hearing from you. Open doors, and thank you so much for your partnership and for being here this afternoon.
Thank you. I remember that standing ovation last year when Secretary Sheldon took us all who had been working on this issue for such a long time by storm and said, if human trafficking isn't a child welfare issue, I don't know what is. And I'm really happy to see that Catherine is continuing that momentum with the work that's happening at HHS.